So, introduction to aquaponics. So what is the main drive behind why we started doing aquaponics? At least for me, it was, as I told you before, the combination of something mechanical and nature. And in the past, the farmers always wanted to use the nutrients or the fertilizer that came from feeding the animals on the fields to grow crops. So the same we are trying to achieve in aquaponics, basically trying to use the inputs, which is in this case feed, using it in multiple stages. So we get the output as plants or fish, and we still end up with some waste, and we want to use the waste again to grow new things, either be it plants or algae or whatever we can. The same thing has been done for a long time. Why it has been done? It's because people wanted to use the land as efficient as possible and to try to grow more, since back in the days the fertilizer wasn't a commodity, it was really scarce. And that's why, for instance, the Aztecs, at least that's what the history says, and you know this story really well, they introduced fish into their floating ponds to try to get more of their farming land. The same was done with polyculture. They were trying to, well, they did use and still use this model and try to introduce multiple species into the farming. In this case, it was either pigs or chicken, which defecate into the pond, and the pond, in the pond you have a bigger algae growth because of it, and the fish can eat the algae and therefore grow more. And well, why I did this slide, not to show you something you know already, but in the course of this training, we will try to see how to design a greenhouse efficiently, and efficiently in terms of how it's done in the industry, not how, like the way I started was having some basic knowledge from my agriculture studies, which is far away from what is done in the commercial world. And when I was designing the greenhouse, like not my last, but I didn't put not enough effort into making the whole work processes as efficient as possible, meaning when you harvest the plants, how do you get to them? How do you work with the plants? How do you plant them? Do you have enough space to do that? Do you have enough space to move around the plants when you need to? The height, yeah. There's a lot of things like that. That's, at least me, when I tried to do this, I failed. So we had to solve the problems afterwards, during the production. And that's also a big part why we failed, is definitely managing the greenhouse in this way. The other aspect of why this was so interesting for me was trying to, basically, what I found out later, reinvent the wheel. It was new to me, but it was like trying to research something, trying to find some new techniques. I wasn't really skillful in RAS technology back at the time, so I was just trying to reinvent aerators and all sorts of techniques that are that have been known for ages. So that's why, again, going back to this training, the point is to focus on what industry is doing. So the hydroponic industry, looking at the greenhouse models from Netherlands, and looking at the RAS models that are used throughout the world as efficiently as possible, because even in both of these industries, even if done properly, they can still fail, and do fail. Probably, I don't know, one of 10 is maybe successful, as far as I know. So it's really important to not be a researcher, but if you want to make money, you have to go to the guys that know how to do their stuff, and design accordingly to that. So again, we go back to why we are attracted to these things, because as my colleagues told us before, there's a lot of waste that's been happening here. Like, for instance, in our facility here, each day we use around 20 cubic meters of water, and this is a research facility. The systems are small. If you go to production, the waste of water and solids that come out of that is enormous. And why not use that potential? So, for instance, at least I know for Norway, there are legislations that tax quite highly the waste released out of the plant. So that means that anyone doing RAS is now steering towards trying to minimize that waste, which gives some space, some niche markets, maybe for aquaponics, but definitely for reducing the waste released. And then the aspects where you can produce food locally is also interesting. There's nothing special about aquaponics that can produce locally. It's just the nature of RAS and the hydroponic plant is that's basically, as long as you have a storage of water or a source of water, you can do many things. You can ship the feed in, you can ship the nutrients in, and then you can grow. So, for instance, we did a proposal in Sweden now, and there's a big tendency toward local production of food, and they also want to use waste heat and produce as much as possible locally, which is okay, and it can be done, but at the end, can it be done sustainably, especially in an economic sense, is close to impossible, in my opinion, in these scales. But let's see. I mean, that's why we research and try to find some other ways of doing it. But definitely the good point of aquaponics is that we are promoting different thinking outside the mainstream, and at least trying to do something better that has been done so far. These are definitely the challenges that most of you, I guess, know, at least the ones that you have tried to do something in this area. The financial feasibility, for instance, in our case in Slovenia, was definitely, the labor cost was so high that it took a big portion of the earnings we made from selling the herbs we were growing. Also for the investor, making such a big investment, he of course wants to get it back as soon as possible. And with such an high investment costs mixed with high labor and high maintenance costs, it doesn't go well together. So, and then there's also legislation which is not enabling you to market your produce as ecological, which I think is the right way to do it. It's not ecological. I mean, if you go from the start and you take a look at how we get to the fish pellets and how we then grow fish and try to use that waste, which is far from being perfect for the plants. So we need, at least in our case, we needed to add mineral fertilizers to achieve a somewhat marketable produce. And so why would you market this? Why would you be able to market it as organic since it's not? So I'm really skeptical. But as Simon, I agree with Simon completely. If you want to go like really commercially, you have to look at each system separately and make it as productive as possible. And that means using the best possible technology in both systems, and really research the market that you're trying to sell the produce. What kind of produce are you selling, to what customers, and so on. Doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have a high value product. Maybe it's fine to just sell lettuce in big quantities if you can sell it right. And then we are back to the efficiency, and the point of this training is to, besides having efficient systems, also having efficient workloads, not workloads. The way of working in the systems has to be done efficiently.